For those of you listening to the podcast or ACC Nation Radio, we also invite you to watch us on YouTube. Welcome to ACC Nation. I'm Jim Quist. That's Will Ogenin. And we're joined by our special guest, Bennett Conlin of the Daily Progress, to talk Virginia sports and a whole lot more. Welcome, Bennett.
Thanks so much for having me.
Glad you're here. There's so much to talk about: football, basketball, media days, Olympics, conference realignment, and of course, food, which is strangely enough where I'm going to start this entire conversation. Weird hours, long hours, 24/7 schedule. And what prompted this for me is I've been working on a piece about chicken and waffles. So it's on the brain, it's forefront. So tell us a little bit about some of your favorite places to eat, whether it's right there in Charlottesville, over the mountain in the Shenandoah Valley, or out on the road, because you hit the road from time to time, as evidenced by your visit to Charlotte recently.
Yeah, I mean, plenty of options all over the place. Fortunately, some of these ACC college towns have some darn good dining, so that's been a blast. In Charlottesville, the Bebe Darrow is a place that I like. They've got some interesting cocktails, some good meals. You can go a little crazy there, I guess, with the checkbook. So sometimes I avoid it, but been having that craving a little bit. So hopefully I'll get back. And then obviously Bodo's is the go-to bagel place, which checks the spot. It's certainly a good one. Checks all the boxes you're looking for. It's affordable too, which is part of why I love it. I think that sports writer thing in me, anytime you get a cheap bagel that tastes pretty good, I can't complain about that. And I was just in Harrisonburg earlier today, and I stopped by Billy Jack's, which has a bunch of locations now, sort of across Virginia and the country. Love going there. Love what they've got. Went with sliders today. So that's a good one. And then I think anytime you're anywhere in the ACC, I love to hit up like a lunch spot so you can get some barbecue or some sandwiches. Not a ton are coming to mind, but anywhere local. I sort of lean on some of my colleagues as well. Mike Barber, Richmond Times-Dispatch, big into food. So anytime, yeah, anytime we're on any sort of ACC football trip, I just kind of lean on Mike, and he helps me out with that. So we were in Charlotte and we went to some place. It was like a cellar last time for media days. Downstairs, great cocktails, really good food. They had like this really cool beer thing within the cellar where they had 300 different kinds of beer, and they cooled it, I think, to like 50 some degrees. So it was ideal for the stouts that they had and things like that. So Mike's a good one to lean on. And then Danielle Stein was also there. She works for CBS 19 in town, and they're big foodies. So I'm fortunate that I've got some people who can guide me around a little bit.
Just so that I may need to clarify this a little bit. Mike used to be in the restaurant business. So
yes,
it's a big reason why he is such a big foodie. A couple of things. First of all, on that first place you talked about, you started out with cocktails, then you brought in stouts here at the end. So I'm interested in the stout part mainly because I'm a stout guy. So is that your favorite beer?
It's not my favorite beer. I'll go to it though in the fall and winter. It's certainly a good time. I've kind of been on a sour kick, at least in the summer for a while. I'm huge into like sour candy and stuff. I know some people, not their taste, but I'll do it. I had it sort of an IPA phase for a while, which I think I'm sort of gone out of that and might come back in at some point. But yeah, if you can get a good stout in the fall and winter, it's certainly an enjoyable one. And I'm enjoying the cocktails too. That's something I love, a good craft cocktail or gin, vodka, whiskey, anything really. Whiskey and some sort of lemon concoction is something that I've gone to a lot recently.
I can already tell you and I have to hit a restaurant someplace. When it comes to cocktails and trying out different beers and rotating, I'm all there with you. Definitely.
It's a ton of fun.
Lots of, like, as you point out, lots of good food in all of the cities across the ACC. And man, it's neat to hear where people go and what they do and the types of foods they like to enjoy. So, so let's talk about one thing that's been driving, I think, everybody to distraction: realignment. I almost hate to bring it up. We did have a conversation just a couple of days ago talking about realignment and how it was going to impact all the conferences and stuff. But everybody has a slightly different perspective. And so you've had enough time to digest it and probably pop a couple of Tums while you're at it, just to even that whole thing out. What are your thoughts on realignment? Drive Will crazy, because it is about taking him over the deep end.
Yeah, so I went to JMU. So JMU fans love to talk about realignment with regards to JMU without anything actually happening with the Dukes. So I've been around realignment talk for a while. Obviously, the Oklahoma and Texas to the SEC is a big deal, and it's interesting. I mean, it's going to make what looks like a mega conference there in the South with some geographic ties, and then pretty much everyone just trying to get as much money as possible. It seems like out of that group, which I understand that's kind of what college sports is. In some ways, I think from a fan perspective, it's a little disappointing. Like if you're some of the other teams in the Big 12 and you see those teams try to bail just for money and maybe lose some of those rivalries and things like that, it's disappointing. I also think, if you're a Virginia fan or someone who likes the ACC, I still think the ACC is in a decent spot. I mean, Notre Dame's the big one that comes up, obviously, in terms of adding them for football. There'd be a lot of value there if Notre Dame would actually do that, at least for the ACC side. I know Notre Dame might feel differently about the value added, which is probably why they're not in the ACC at this point. But I think they would add a lot of value. I think it's something Notre Dame could potentially consider. And I think the ACC in the short term is in a decent spot. It's a really good basketball league. I know football is sort of number one, and Jim Phillips was saying that at ACC kickoff, that football eats first, and he's interested in Notre Dame and all that stuff. But I think it's going to be a good football year for the league, which I think will be beneficial. I think it's a conference that can be in a good spot. There are a lot of really great institutions, and they can still add when they want to, right? They don't have to sort of push things and force anyone. Like West Virginia would be a cool add. I know some people within there maybe go back and forth on whether they actually want the Mountaineers. I think West Virginia would be a pretty good addition across the board in terms of what they do athletically. So that's an option. Notre Dame's an option. They have options. They could try to poach from the Big Ten or something. I mean, you can get creative with some of these places that you try to get, but it's a handful for sure. It's a lot to grapple with. I also think some of it, there's going to be a lot going on, but the Big Ten, the ACC, I think also have a chance to kind of digest things and be patient with it, especially given some of the agreements in place in the conference. It seems like the ACC's got, a decade plus before anyone, it'd be very hard for anyone from the ACC to bail, at least is my understanding. So I think that's a good spot for the league.
Before Will ask you questions along these lines, since you're a JMU fan, went to JMU, obviously. How long before JMU makes that leap to Division I and plays in the bowl group?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting, right? They're a really good FCS team. They've been at the top of the FCS for a while and super competitive in that area. I think they won like 7 conference titles across the board last year in the CAA. So they're one of the best teams in that league. I mean, if the American came calling, I think they'd certainly join the American Athletic. But you look at some of the other ones like Conference USA and the Sun Belt, which is where they would maybe make the most sense in terms of how good they are and things like that. The geographic ties don't make a lot of sense. So then you're traveling a lot to play a lot of teams. Like I'm not getting overly excited to watch JMU play Florida Atlantic. I don't think that's something that's all that exciting, or what, like a North Texas. I mean, I don't think any of that makes a ton of sense. So I think if you're JMU and the position the Dukes have kind of taken is, if you can be in a more regional league, and if there's more realignment that happens later where you can play against like an Appalachian State or an Old Dominion, maybe they find their way back into a league or things like that. I think that would make a lot more sense for JMU. So you either move up to a point where you're in a pretty darn big league in a spot where you can really compete at the FBS level, or I think you just take advantage of where you are and say, hey, we're going to win a lot of games in a geographically competitive league that excites our fans and gives us a chance every now and then to, make the NCAA tournament in basketball, and you win a bunch of FCS titles and maybe you get an FBS game every now and then. I think JMU fans, if you go into Harrisonburg and go to football season, they're still talking about how they beat Virginia Tech quite a long time ago. So they'll take those wins where they get them. And I think there's no reason, sort of like the ACC in a little bit, there's no reason to really rush into anything that doesn't benefit you.
All right, so we need to dive into what we really wanted to talk about here, and that is, well, Bennett being a Lions fan, Jim being a Bears fan, I being a Vikings fan, we all have one thing in the common: bleep the Packers. Yeah. But no, let's actually get on to the topic here. Virginia was it was a rough year last year, just between COVID and injuries, and for the second straight year playing playing the backups in the secondary. But let's start here. Usually when we have people on to talk Virginia football, we always talk about how the defensive side of the football is always the strongest, and all the questions are on offense. That's not the case this year. This offense looks to be pretty good. Brennan Armstrong, I thought he played pretty well last year, but would you say his probably the next step in his development is his decision making?
Yeah, and I think he would agree with that too. He's said that quite a bit, and he's pretty open and honest when he speaks to the media and things like that. Is, when he has multiple interceptions or makes some of those boneheaded throws. I mean, he had a couple throws last year that he threw it like straight to a defender, and everyone in the stadium was kind of like, "What in the world was he looking at?" And I think he said the same after the games and when he looked at it on film later in the week. So if he can cut down on the interceptions, which he did for a pretty good stretch there toward the end of the year, and then he struggled a little bit again in the Virginia Tech game. But when he limits the turnovers and can stay healthy, he's a really dynamic runner. He's super aggressive. He's someone you can run a lot. He's got better arm strength than people realize. Like, he's an accurate thrower and things like that, but he can move it down the field. And they have some good deep threats. I think Dontavian Wicks is a guy that if anyone went to the spring game or read about the spring game, really showed out and was really good there. Obviously, the Lavelle Davis injury is disappointing because they were hoping to have Wicks and Davis, which would have been pretty darn good. But Jelani Woods, a tight end, really good player. The offensive line, I mean, you've seen people in ESPN and other outlets have sort of said that that's the best offensive line group in the conference. So you've got that. You got a quarterback who has a chance to be pretty good. I think the offense will be really good. I think the offense is kind of getting slept on. People have mentioned that, yeah, the offensive line's really good, but I think Brennan Armstrong's pretty good. And when you talk about the need for a running game, if you have the best offensive line in the conference, I would think the running game would sort of follow suit. And they've got a couple of guys who I think can step in and be pretty good at running back.
I thought one of the smartest things that Robert and I did was put Keaton Thompson's kind of that Swiss Army knife thing. He ran a lot, went out wide and caught some passes. And I know he was dealing with the shoulder injury last season that kind of prevented him from throwing the ball. Could he be, in a situation where he could throw some passes this season?
Definitely. So I don't know if he can throw like 30 plus passes in a game, which is basically what he said about his shoulder, but his shoulder is healthier than it was last year at the beginning of the year. So he's someone that I think they kind of expect to have throwing the ball, running the ball, catching the ball. They'll line him up anywhere on offense and he'll do what he can. He's a really dangerous weapon. I think he's awesome because the defense has to key in on where he is. You can move him in motion. You can line him up in the backfield. You can line him up wide in the slot, like you mentioned. So when you've got that, you've got Wicks. I haven't even mentioned Billy Kemp, who just catches pretty much everything thrown his way. Jelani Woods. Like, I think they've got a decent haul of weapons, and Keaton Thompson is someone that they can get really creative with. And I guess if Brennan Armstrong gets banged up, you could probably have enough out of his arm to have him be the backup quarterback if you need him to be.
So you talked about the receivers, and I always feel like the people underrate these receivers, and I think Marcus Higgins has done an outstanding job of developing wide receivers for quite some time, even though they don't necessarily always go to the pros. They just have great college careers. Can you speak to what Higgins has done, to help develop these wide receivers?
Yeah, well, he's someone that people respect a lot within the locker room, which really helps, right? He was a really good player in his own right, which is certainly something, but he also, I mean, he's just like a really good athlete still. I mean, he'll run like a marathon before practice, just like a casual marathon that he runs in the morning, then shows up to practice. I think the guys see that and the amount of work he puts in and things like that. So I think that helps. And he also knows what he's talking about, having, played quarterback at times and played wide receiver throughout his career. So really experienced, knows what he's doing. He's a really good leader and he has done a good job. And I think he's instilled some confidence in the guys and through the drills that you've got to win jump balls, which is a big thing with wide receivers, right? It's a 50-50 ball. They kind of claim that they're a 90-10 ball or something like that. So contested catches is a big deal for them and something that they practice a lot. And running good routes, all that sort of stuff. But I think the contested catches, the confidence he's sort of instilled in them and the idea that, hey, you've got to think of yourself as elite wide receivers and practice like it is something that's really paid off for a lot of these guys. So he's a big time position coach. They've got a lot of really good position coaches that I think are kind of flying under the radar. And I think it's helped the team get to where it is now, which is still under the radar as a group, but I think it's a pretty good football team going into this fall.
So you speak of this team, the coaching and the team in general as being under the radar. And that's sort of the impression that I get. And when we earlier this summer ranked all of the teams in the ACC, we picked Virginia at number 5. Now you were just at media days, and collectively, everybody picked Virginia at number 8. I can see that middle of the pack. There's some, you can kind of go either way with this. I took something away from an interview that Bronco had with the ACC Network folks. He was being a little more coy than I'm used to seeing him be. And it was a red flag. It went up immediately. I went, there's something going on here, something that he knows or feels is missing. We're missing it. So when we start laying out this groundwork, as Will has just done, and you've laid out how the players are coming together and teams coming together, what they can provide. Let me ask you from your perspective, because you're absorbing information, just droves of it constantly about this team. And eventually at some point, you also get a red flag that says, hey, maybe we need to look closer at something. Have you gotten that feeling with this team? Do you feel like there's more there than meets the eye, and that this is a team we ought to be keeping a close eye on?
Yeah, I think they can be a good team. I had them picked 3rd in the Coastal. I think they'll be a good football team. And they keep saying, hey, we're the defending Coastal champions, which I guess is technically true with last year not having divisions. I think you could certainly question that a little bit, given how last year went. They weren't the best team of the Coastal teams and things like that. But they are technically, when the Coastal exists, the defending division champions. And they've got a good team. And I think they're really confident in what they're able to do. And I think they should be. Like, you look at people talk about Virginia, and they mention the offensive line being really good. And they talk about Brennan Armstrong being, an above average quarterback in the league. But then the question marks are like the secondary, and then you look at the running game. And they've got some good running backs, and you have a really good offensive line, which I think is a huge deal in the running game. And I think some of the running backs will certainly step up this season. In the secondary, like, a lot of that is because you've got Joey Blunt was hurt last season. You have guys who are dealing with injuries. You've got Nick Grant back. You've got Darius Bratton, both those guys at corner. Joey Blunt and Devontae Cross at safety. Cross had played corner a little bit. He's way better at safety, in my opinion. I think that's a much better fit for him. So that helps the secondary. You added Josh Hayes, who's, I think he's the North Dakota State kid who comes in. He's got a chance to play corner. And Anthony Johnson's a Louisville graduate transfer at safety. So you've got a little bit of depth now. You've also got some other guys who have played in the past and have experience. They're not going to be the worst pass defense in the ACC. I feel pretty confident saying that. People sort of assumed that going into the season, they're going to be the worst passing defense in the ACC because they were last season. I think they've got a chance to be a top half of the ACC in passing yards allowed, maybe even, top 5. Like, they've been good in the past under Bronco in the secondary. And the really only thing that's derailed them has been numerous injuries. You add a couple of guys and they have more depth. I think they'll be good defensively. I think the defensive line has some pieces. At the end of last season, they were running pretty much anyone they could. They had to move offensive linemen over to defensive line because of injuries and COVID and transfers. Jawan Briggs transferring in November was certainly a shock to the system. So to have these guys healthy and ready to go on the defensive line, linebacker, maybe you've got some questions, but Nick Jackson's pretty good. They've got some other bodies there. Noah Taylor's really good. So there are options defensively that I think are underrated. And the thing with Virginia, and this happens all the time, is they don't have like brand name players. They don't have a Sam Howell. They don't have, some of these guys like a Justin Ross, a wide receiver, who's maybe going to be a first round pick or whatever that excites people. But they have a really good offensive line. They have a bunch of skill guys that are ridiculously underrated. They have a quarterback that people saw him last year in the second half of the season. He was good, but it seems like everyone still got him like that's the 11th best quarterback in the conference. I think Brennan Armstrong takes that kind of personally. So you add that in with a good defense. I think Bronco Mendenhall feels really good about this team, and I think they have a chance to surprise some people because, I don't know, 5th in the Coastal felt really low to me.
I totally agree with that, and I go back to us picking them a 5th overall in the ACC, and I just think this is a team that has so much talent, and they have grown. And I give Brennan Armstrong huge marks. I think he's right up there in the top echelon of ACC quarterbacks, and a lot of people give him that credit. I think he has shown his skill. It started out rough, but he has picked up. Last year he picked up the pieces and really started to show something. Let's go back to media days for just a moment, and we'll go off the track here a little further, and just look at it from the perspective of all the teams that you had exposure to, because I don't know if you were down there for both days or not. My assumption was that you were there just for the Virginia aspect of it, but you may have been there for both days. What do you take away from what you were exposed to and some of the teams that maybe we ought to be keeping a closer eye on as well?
Yeah, so I stayed for a little bit of the Atlantic division the next day as well. In that division, and people are high on NC State. I think there's good reason to be. NC State returns a lot of really good players. I think that's a team that could be pretty good in that division. And that one feels like a toss-up outside of Clemson, obviously, right? I mean, Clemson's the favorite to win that division in the league, and there's good reason why they've proved that over years. But there's some good teams in that league. I think Wake Forest and Louisville are a couple I'm interested to see. I think they've got a chance to be good offensively. We'll see what both those teams can do defensively and how much they can really build, I guess, on some recent seasons and some successes. Louisville's really interesting with Scott Satterfield, and it seemed like he was trying to jump ship last year. They've had a bunch of stuff this year about how he's really committed. So we'll see if the locker room buys into that and how much he can show it. But as far as the Coastal, yeah, I mean, North Carolina, Miami are the two teams that people have sort of pegged as the top two teams. Carolina, I feel pretty good about. Miami, I kind of want to see it. I had them at second, but like Derek King's coming off an ACL. I mean, I was going to ACC kickoff and I was like, is he there? Is he healthy enough? It seems like he is. And he was saying he's gotten back to 100%, but to go out and actually play games with that at 100%, I think I want to see that a little bit. It's been kind of a short period of time. So we'll see what happens with that. And Virginia Tech's actually a really fascinating case because people seem pretty confident in the Hokies. I'm not as confident in the Hokies. Like, I think they've got some good players. I think the defense has a chance to be pretty good. Braxton Burmeister has not played a ton, and I think like I'd like to see more from him and see him actually prove that he's sort of an upper echelon ACC quarterback. The other issue I have with Virginia Tech is some of the depth. I mean, there are a couple positions there, quarterback included. If Burmeister goes down or somebody goes down, I think they're in huge trouble, where I think other teams in the league, Virginia included, have better depth of positions. I think when people factor in their, preseason predictions, a lot of times they go in there with what they see on paper immediately and forget that it's a very violent sport. And the roster you see in week one is almost never the roster you see for the bowl game or things like that last week of the season. So we'll see how Virginia Tech can handle that. I mean, for me, at least, I have an easier time seeing Justin Fuente leaving Blacksburg than I do of them winning the Coastal. I think that to me makes more sense. So we'll see what happens with that. So they're a team I'm really interested in. And yeah, I think Virginia's got a chance to be good. Pitt, another team with some really good pieces, but they're a team that always feels like they pick up a huge win and they'll play like Western Michigan the next week and lose by 14 and you can just write them off. So I think they've got a lot of talent. I think this Pitt team has a chance to be good, but again, it's another team that you kind of need to see it. So I think it's setting up to be a really good year of coastal chaos for sure. I'm excited to have the divisions back. I like the divisions, and I think the Coastal will be up in the air, and I think the Atlantic will be up in the air for second place. I think Clemson's got a pretty good stronghold on that for now.
Before Will gets a little more into detail, I have a question about Jim Phillips and your impressions about what he said and his leadership thus far. Some of his comments prior to us knowing about the realignment chaos, using that term again, out there, indicated that his focus is building football, making it the money making machine it ought to be, and that will help pay for everybody else, and it's the ticket. Anything that you get from watching and listening to him from the standpoint of his leadership and confidence in him as the new commissioner?
I think he's going to be a good commissioner. I think if you're a Big Ten fan and you saw what he did at Northwestern and maybe have some questions with Kevin Warren, you might be thinking of, well, why didn't we grab this guy? So I think he's got a chance to be pretty good. He said some things that made a lot of sense in terms of wanting to add Notre Dame and football eating first. I think some of that you have to take with a grain of salt, right? Was saying that, football eats first, but it'll feed everyone else and everything will be great. And all the other sports will also be valued. We've seen over the years, that's not really true. And you look at the pandemic coming in and some schools across the country were quick to pull the plug on some sports, not necessarily ACC schools, but football and some of those revenue sports, I guess, technically eat first a lot. And I think it makes sense for what they're doing. And Jim Phillips knows what he's doing. It seems like he's coming in with a level-headed mind and taking realignment as it comes. So that'll be valuable for the conference. And I think ACC fans will be excited. I don't know how much of this is really Jim Phillips. I think some of this is just agreements ending with ESPN and Comcast and that sort of stuff. It certainly sounds like he was pretty optimistic about the ACC network getting on Comcast. It sounded like ahead of this upcoming season. So I think there's certainly some possibility for that. They seemed excited about that. I think a lot of that, though, is kind of when agreements ended, and they'll make it happen after that. But yeah, I think he's got a good idea there of what he can do with football and building that out, which I think will be valuable. And I mean, the league really at this point, if it keeps its members, it doesn't need to do a ton in terms of building basketball. You've got Duke, North Carolina, Virginia sort of built itself up into an elite basketball program. It's probably going to be one of the top tier basketball conferences for a very long time to come. The Olympic sports across the board have been phenomenal in the ACC. So I think it makes sense from a revenue perspective. I also think it makes sense from an ACC perspective to build up football, because that's kind of the one sport where I think they had mentioned at ACC kickoff, 3 of the last 8 national champions are from the ACC, and Clemson's carrying a whole lot of water there, right? I mean, they're doing all that. So when you talk about the ACC accomplishing stuff and you take out Clemson, it gets a little different. I guess you could say the same in some regards to the Big Ten and what Ohio State has done. But you look at the SEC, there's a little bit more balance, and you've got some teams alongside Alabama kind of pulling their weight, especially if you add an Oklahoma to Texas. So yeah, that's an area where Notre Dame could help, but you could also benefit a lot. I think the ACC could, from having some of these teams that are like 8-4, 9-3 kind of good, to taking a step to being, challenging for the college football playoff. I think having Miami and Florida State and some of those powerful brands getting back to the point where they're competitive and not, canceling games 30 minutes before kickoff on Saturdays for COVID issues would be a heck of a bonus for those programs. So yeah, I think it makes sense what Jim Phillips is saying about football eating first. I think it makes a ton of sense for the league and financially as well.
So Bennett, I want to get back to the team for a second, because you talked about one of the questions with the team is the secondary, and obviously they're healthy and add a couple of grad transfers in. So hopefully, like I said at the beginning, they won't be going to like 4-string cornerbacks this year to start games. But one of my other concerns with the defense is pass rush. I mean, the big guy that led the team in sacks is Charles Snowden. He's no longer there. I believe he's playing for Jim's Bears. And the other guys are gone. Matt Gamm, I think, was there, and he's gone. And obviously Juwan Briggs is now in Cincinnati. Who could be the person that steps up in terms of getting to the quarterback this year?
Yeah, I mean, it depends a little bit sometimes what they do with the linebackers. Like Noah Taylor, if they rush him, can get home, but a lot of times they stuck him in coverage. He was also dealing with something last year where he was not 100%. Now I believe he is, which I think will make a big difference on the edge at linebacker with Noah Taylor. But Aaron Famui, I think, is the name that really stands out to me. He's a big-time defensive lineman who's really good, opted out of the 2020 season because of COVID and that sort of thing. He's back. We're told that he's in pretty good shape. A lot of the opt-outs stayed in pretty good shape, at least within reason, when you're away from the program. So I think Famui's a guy to keep an eye on. I think he's got a chance to generate some pass rush, and they kind of need it from the defensive line. I know they haven't asked the defensive line a lot in terms of pressure. They just wanted to sort of do their job and plug the holes, things like that, stop the run, and let the linebackers come home. Virginia's defense would take a huge step forward if the defensive ends, defensive tackles, whatever, could start generating pressure consistently. And I think Famui is a guy who can absolutely do that.
So another concern too is special teams. Obviously, Brian Delaney has been one of the most successful kickers in recent memory for Virginia, but he is gone. How's the kicker situation holding up then?
Yeah, Bronco at ACC kickoff said it's to be determined. So I think there's still going to be a lot of competition in fall camp for that. Justin Dunkel has handled kickoffs before. He makes a lot of sense, at least from what they've said. He sounds like he'll probably be the starting kicker. That would be my guess in terms of kickoffs and field goals. He's pretty good at it. They've got, I forget the other name. I'll have to brush up on the kicker battle here in the coming weeks. But they did at the spring game. They mentioned Dunkel's got the stronger leg, and they had someone else in there who's got a more accurate leg and clearly has more height on his field goals. And you could see that pretty clearly in the spring game. Dunkels were kind of exploding off his foot where other people who were out there were lofting him up, but they had some pretty good height on him. So I think Dunkel's got a pretty good chance just because of how strong his leg is. And then Punter's got a chance to be competitive as well. I know they like some of the guys that they had brought back. I think Brendan Farrell's a name who they brought back. They also brought in a transfer from Florida whose name is escaping me. That's where I'll have to brush up on my punter and kicker battles, but he booms the ball, the kid from Florida. So I think he's got a really good chance. I think he's a grad transfer who just demolishes the ball. So he's got a chance to come in there and actually maybe be an upgrade over what they've had the last couple of years.
So I want to talk schedule real quick, and I think this is where I feel like this is in Virginia's favor because I think it's really sets up nicely for them. Obviously, they open up with William and Mary, and we're going to get our Mike London was a cop jokes out right away. But Illinois, new coach, that's a winnable game. I mean, at UNC, they'll be an underdog, but they've also beat them 4 times in a row. Wake could be tricky, even though it's home. Wake is a team I think is criminally underrated because they're one of the most experienced teams in the league. At Miami, they've lost back-to-back the games there, but they've been 1-score games. They get Tech at home this year. At BYU, when they've lost just about everybody. So overall, do you think this is a team that could challenge for say like 8 wins this season?
Yeah, I think a lot of the over-unders I've seen are like 6 for Virginia. I think you've got to go over with this team. Like, I think they're going to be a really good team. I think they're going to have a chance to be super competitive. You mentioned the schedule and how it sets up decently. I mean, there's the stretch in there in October. That's not all that daunting with Louisville, Duke, and Georgia Tech. I mean, that sounds pretty good to me. And then BYU, like you mentioned, I think a lot of people have kind of said, oh, BYU, and they're thinking about last year and Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson's not there anymore. They've lost a lot. I don't expect BYU to be, like a college football playoff darling. I don't even know if BYU will contend to be ranked. Like, I think they've lost quite a bit and might struggle a little bit. So obviously you've got the storylines with Bronco and most of the coaching staff that'll dominate that week, and they'll obviously take that game pretty darn seriously. But I don't know how much more challenging that is than an ACC game, if at all. And then you've got Notre Dame, which is exciting. You got them in Charlottesville. So they've got some winnable games, and I don't think there's anyone really on the schedule that they can't beat. I mean, at North Carolina is a really hard game, but like you mentioned, they've had success against North Carolina. I thought when North Carolina came into Charlottesville last year, I thought North Carolina was going to kind of cruise by them just because of how that offense was playing and how Virginia had struggled. And then, of course, Virginia goes out and scores 44 points and looks unstoppable. They've got Keaton Thompson late in the game with the fake punt that advances it. So they just find ways to win games. There's a lot of belief within the program. And I think the schedule start is a pretty huge deal because last year I thought they could have benefited a lot from a couple, I don't know if cupcake is the right word, but sort of ease into the schedule. William Mary is not a team that should contend with Virginia. I think Virginia should win that one pretty handily, get a lot of guys in the game, get a rhythm for their players, which is something they missed at the beginning of last year. They weren't really able to jump in and generate a great rhythm, even though they started off decently in that game over Duke. But Duke's has an unbelievable case of turnoveritis whenever it sees Virginia. I don't know what it is, but they seem to turn the ball over 5+ times against the Hoos whenever that matchup happens. So it'll be interesting. I think William Mary's a good matchup, and Illinois, I think, is a ways away with Bielema stepping in there. I think they're a little while away. So if you can get those 2 wins, gain confidence, figure out what you want your attack to be on both sides, and get a little more rhythm before going into North Carolina, I think it sets up pretty well for Virginia.
Keeping on that schedule, one of the things that I was going over earlier this evening was looking at the schedule over the last couple of years and how they've performed. And I've noticed just year after year after year, games getting tighter and tighter and pulling off wins, as you guys had just indicated, that winning over North Carolina. That's no small feat, no matter where you are. So this year, and again, I'm just, maybe this is just my sole opinion, but in this particular case, that's where the question's coming from. So I'm just saying that these teams that are daunting on paper, with the improvement year over year by Virginia, this may be the year in my book that they might be able to pull off wins against some of these teams that maybe they quote unquote shouldn't be beating. Miami this year is going to be tough. North Carolina is going to be tough. There's no doubt about that. Notre Dame is going to be tough. Out of those 3 games, I can certainly see at least 2 of them being tight, maybe an upset coming. What are your thoughts along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I think there are a couple of things that really jump out when you look at Virginia the last few years. And one of them is that it gets talked about a little bit, but maybe not enough. They're really good at home. Like, they're one of the best teams in the conference and in college football the last couple of years at home. And the fact that they're able to get fans back in there, and I think rejuvenated fans a little bit, is a big deal to me. And they've lost a lot of games on the road, but I think at a certain point, they're going to be able to get over that hurdle. So if they can continue to have really good success at home, you mentioned like the Notre Dame game, that would be obviously a huge home win. You got Virginia Tech at home. Like, there are some big games that they have at home that they could win. There are also some winnable road games. North Carolina, Miami are super tough. You'll have chances, BYU, Pitt, you got Louisville. And I mean, like, those are some winnable games. And if you can steal one of the North Carolina or Miami games, puts you in a pretty good spot. So it's a team that I think is underrated. They're good at home. They have what I think is a pretty good team. And I think Bronco Mendenhall is very underrated as a coach. What he did at BYU probably isn't appreciated enough on the East Coast, just because, they're playing at like 10 o'clock whenever they were, and it's not a Power 5 school, but like, he built them into a pretty competitive year in and year out program. I think that's a big deal and something that should stand out. I mean, you look at some of the coastal coaches, I think he should be right up there in terms of what he's accomplished, and even what he's accomplished at Virginia to build them up to this point. So I like where Virginia stands going into this year.
So 2 questions for you, and maybe we'll make a quick transition over into basketball, because I know Will is just chomping at the bit to get into some of that. Offensive and defensive line. To me, I see enough. A line, offensive and defensive line, is and what can make or break a team, period. And I see nothing but positive here on both for Virginia. Any thoughts on the offensive line, how it's going to make a big difference? And we talked about this earlier about the running game, and the defensive line and what it can do to stop runs and to put pressure on the quarterback.
Yeah, I think the defensive line will be good. They've got some returners. Mandy Alonso has been around for a while, and they've got some other young guys they really like on that group. Famui coming back helps with the pass rush, I think. So defensive line should be solid, and gives the linebackers a chance to attack downhill, which is good. Offensive line really stands out to me. Some of it too is the chemistry. Like, they've talked about this too, the offensive line group. Like, they know what they're going to do going into plays. If there's a certain blitz that comes early in their careers, they would not communicate well, didn't really know what was happening, and they'd give up sacks or lost yardage kind of plays. Now they know exactly what to do. They're, competitive and fiery as a group. They're playing at a level that allows them to actually generate push instead of just sort of holding their own. So I think that's invaluable in the run game. They know what to do in terms of pass protection. So if you can be strong in the trenches, and I think they are, it gives them a chance to be way more competitive than they've been in previous seasons as a group. So I think that'll help the running attack a ton, is that veteran offensive line that has good chemistry and knows what to do. And I kind of like the running backs. I think they've got some good running backs behind them. Mike Collins is another opt-out in 2020 who I think has a chance to be really good. Wayne Talapapa, I think, is best in short yardage, and now they have enough guys where he could actually be consistently in short yardage. Ronnie Walker Jr. And then Ahmad Faustin's got really good hands on the backfield. He's a freshman who showed out pretty well in the spring game. So they've got options there to go behind the offensive line. And like you're saying, the development of the program has been impressive. I think a lot of that is due to what they've done in the trenches. The offensive line is probably the best it's ever been under Bronco Mendenhall, and the defensive line should be competitive and solid. So they're pretty good in the trenches, which is a huge deal in college football and any form of football. As a Detroit Lions fan, I've seen many times my quarterback go down with poor pass protection. So they're getting there now. But no, I think Virginia's in a good spot on both fronts where they'll they'll be among the top in the ACC.
Just to be encouraging, and I say this sincerely, it's nice to see the Detroit Lions coming back and actually going in the right direction. You know, I hate seeing a conference be uneven. I mean, if you're not having the true black and blue,
Right.
group there going at each other constantly, it's really no fun. And so I am so glad to see Detroit back. So I'm hoping, this is my thought as a Chicago Bears fan. I think that the Vikings have a good shot this year at usurping Green Bay, and I'm really crossing my fingers.
Don't get my hopes up, Jim.
Unless you have more football, we can jump right into basketball because
one quick thing on football before we transition to basketball. And we've been talking about the offensive line and underrated coaches. What Garrett Tujek has done for this offensive line, I think it can't go unnoticed. Not only just end of development, but the way he's helped when recruiting these last few cycles as well. They've been getting a lot of 4-star talent, and really good. And I know they're in for a 5-star. I don't know how that's going to work out. I think, he's, the fact that they're in the final 2 or 3 for a 5-star really tells just to the level of recruiting and development Tujek has done.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's at least something I've noticed, especially the last few months, is when you look at some of the recruiting sites and the information, if there's a 4 or 5-star kid typically that's looking at Virginia or has them in his top 8 or 10 or whatever, I guess the kids are doing nowadays, it tends to be an offensive line guy, at least for Virginia. And I think that says a lot about the job the coaching staff has done with that group. Is like they want to play for that group in that unit, and they want to be a part of Virginia along the offensive front. And that's something, 5 years ago, I don't think that was the case. So yeah, he's done a really good job in recruiting and building that group. It's been really impressive.
All right, let me real quick get into basketball before we gotta cut this. But coming off, I would say just a little bit disappointing season, just because the defense wasn't up to its normal selves. But I think that this season's team is going to be a lot better on the defensive side of the ball. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I think they've got some guys who can really defend, especially on the perimeter. I mean, you've still got the guards who are really good with Kihei Clark and Reese Beekman, and Armand Franklin's the Indiana transfer should be pretty good. Jaden Gardner, I think, gives them a physical presence that they were kind of missing a little bit. They've had some guys in the past who have been really physical. I think Braxton Key and Mamadi Diakite, that duo was big time a couple years ago in terms of how physical they were. They maybe lacked that a little bit. Jay Huff added some, maybe as the season went on, but he's got really good shot blocking ability, but maybe wasn't the same guy who was, bullying people down the low block, things like that defensively. So I think they'll be good, which is obviously what Tony Bennett wants. He wants them to be, a top 5 team in defensive efficiency. They've got a chance to do that again. And they don't have quite as many bodies maybe as past years in terms of some of the guys who are vying for playing time with some of the exits through the transfer portal, but I still think they've got a really good team, and Tony Bennett is the coach. So I imagine they'll be a top 25 caliber team. We'll see how much better than that they can get, though. I think right now, watching them, or at least looking at what they have on paper, they strike me as a team that'll be in the top 25, but I wonder how close they can get to being a Final Four contender.
Let me ask you about one player real quick, and that's Caden Shedrick, who just could never get out of the gates last season. He battled mono before the season, lost a bunch of weight, came back, played a little bit, but then sat out the rest of the season. And I don't think it was exactly explained why, but I feel like he has a lot of potential. But it feels like this season, a lot of people expect him to start, but I think Kafaro will probably be the starter right away. What do you see for Shedrick this season? Because I think he's going to be real pivotal for this team.
He's got so much potential, and a lot of it, hinges on him being healthy. I was dealing with a ton last year, so if they can get him fully healthy, he's got a chance to be special. I mean, he's got a ton of height and length, which is super valuable defensively. He can block shots, but he's got, maybe a little more weight and strength than Huff had. So he's got a chance to be pretty good defensively, rebounds the ball well. I think for him, what's so exciting is offensively, he's got really nice touch. I don't know if that necessarily means 3-point shooting touch, but like he can go outside the paint and shoot in the mid range and that area, score in the low post. he's got many ways he can be really valuable. And last year he showed it a couple of times, even despite, these in and outs of mono, which he got, I guess, in like October before the season, or mono like things. Then he was dealing with more health issues as the season went on. So he's a guy they need to get healthy. But yeah, he's definitely a good one to pinpoint, because he's also someone that stayed around. They lost some of those guys that I think maybe would have been names to look for this season in the transfer portal. So I think Caden Shedrick, he's going to have opportunity. Kafaro is really physical and really good, but I think offensively he's limited. They call him Jack Salt 2.0 at times. I think he's got a better offensive game than Jack Salt did in some ways, but Kafaro still, every now and then, he looks a little bit like a bull in a china shop, right? Where he picks up 3,000 2 minutes or something. So he'll have to work on that a little bit. And that's an area where I do think Shedrick can be really valuable. Is, hey, there's a little more finesse in his game. I think he's someone who could come in and have a lot of success because he still has some of that strength.
So given all this, who do you think leads the team in scoring this year?
That's a good question. I'll say Jaden Gardner. I think just what he's done the last few years, that guy can really score the ball. He rebounds it pretty well. I think he's got a chance to get some offensive board and clean up some shots. I would like to say one of the guards. I guess my issue with the guards is Kihei Clark and Reese Beekman. Kind of got to see a little more from the 3-point line to peg them as the leading scorer. I think both those guys get to the rim really well. I think they have a chance to rack up a ton of assists. Armon Franklin's interesting, though, because he can really shoot it. So he'll be in there. But Jaden Gardner, what he's done at East Carolina with scoring and rebounding, I'll say he's a pretty safe bet. He's got some ability in his game where I think he's got a chance to score at quite a high level.
I got to be honest with you. I missed those screens by Jack. Okay. I mean, and like I said, assault. It was
not going to lie. Not long ago, I went and pulled up the one on YouTube of when he knocked down the NC State player. That was great.
Those are I mean, basketball, people say it's not a physical game. It shouldn't be a physical game like that. Okay, sure. But those are just classic moves that anybody and everybody can do. And let me just tell you something. As a coaching assistant, helping out high school girls basketball, I was showing them how to do that. Mm-hmm. I had a 5'3" girl guard put me on my rear, and I mean, because she knew how to do it. She knew how to do that. And I'm telling you, it was a thing of beauty. I think everybody else was sort of stunned that, because I was significantly bigger, but it can be done. And it's fun to watch when somebody does it the right way. Olympic swimming has provided a really nice snapshot of what Virginia's women's team is going to look like for a few years. Any thoughts there on what a spectacular performance?
They're loaded. Yeah. I mean, they've got the amount of, athletes that were able to qualify was really impressive. We were talking to like Alex Walsh a couple of weeks ago. I think was just a freshman this past year, and what she's doing and what the whole team is doing is really fascinating to me, because I had talked to Todd DeSorbo a couple times, but we talked to him ahead of the Olympics. He was like, yeah, this is pretty much what we care about. Like, this is the plan for Virginia swimming and diving, is to make Olympians. And if you're doing that, you got a pretty good chance to win the ACC title. And that logic, when he says it, makes a ton of sense to me, right? If you can get Olympians, then you can win a lot of ACC titles and national titles and things like that. So they've got a really good group. They've got some talented incomers that have been really good. It's been fun to kind of watch them. It feels like every time I turn on the swimming, and I haven't even paid much attention to it, then I'll just be like, and so going to the University of Virginia. It feels like every time someone's competing there, they're doing that. And Paige Madden, I know she had a really impressive journey this season. Then to make it, she won the national title with UVA and won some individual national titles, and got COVID right after NCAAs. And then she was able still somehow to, go through quarantine and all that stuff, recover physically, even though she also has asthma prior to that, and then was able to make it to the Olympic trials and qualify, which I thought was just unbelievable to go through. She had some pretty decent symptoms, it sounded like, to get COVID, to deal with asthma, to not train, then to, train for a little bit, show up and make it to the Olympic trials and qualify is unbelievable. I think she finished 7th in something last night in the final. So just a really impressive group. And I think it speaks to the ACC's Olympic sport ability. where it seems like there are a lot of these Olympic sport programs and athletes within the ACC that are fantastic. And especially within Virginia, it feels like every night I get some sort of press release from UVA with some unbelievable accomplishment from these Olympic sport programs. And the swimming team is certainly one of those groups.
Yeah, I know rowing is in there too, but I think
Yeah.
a particular individual is with the Canadian rowing team, if I'm not mistaken. But that also explains why UVA is a top-ranked rowing collegiate competitor as well. So just it is amazing, and our time has gone very quickly, and it usually does. You know, when you're having a good conversation, you're learning a lot, sharing some great information. We want to thank you, Bennett, for coming on and joining us, talking about Virginia sports and some other things, and food and drink and whatnot, and JMU. And hey, JMU to the ACC. There we go. Every time I bring that up with some of my other friends who are in sports, who went to JMU, by the way,
Yeah.
I always get this raised eyebrow and some other things that come with it. Anyway, Bennett Conlin of the Daily Progress. You can follow him, and I encourage you to do this on Twitter, and also make sure that you subscribe to the Daily Progress for full coverage of University of Virginia sports. Bennett, thank you for coming on. We appreciate you joining us.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me.
Want more ACC sports news and interviews? Make ACCNation.net your homepage or follow us on Google News. Be sure to subscribe to ACC Nation on your favorite podcast or streaming radio platform. While you're there, we'd appreciate a rating and your support through PayPal. Follow us on social media at ACC Nation. And you'll find Will on Twitter at Will's World MN, and I'm at ACC The Q. Until next time, cheers.
Score.